Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Future of Affordable Housing Symposium, brought to you by the Realtor Political Action Committee, the Naples Women's Council of Realtors, and the Naples chapter of the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. My name is Tina Morocco, and I'm the 2022 president for the Women's Council of Realtors Naples on the Gulf. We have an excellent program planned for you tonight, and before I hand over the microphone to our moderator, I would like to address a couple housekeeping items. We ask that you please silence your cell phones. This evening's program is being recorded and will be made available on the NABOR website. Also, at your seats, you'll see an index card. We ask that if you have questions pertaining to affordable housing, now or throughout the program, that you write it on the card and hand it to Danny in the front of the room. We will attempt to get to as many questions as possible during our Q&A and before the program ends at 6:30. Now I have the pleasure to present our moderator for the evening, Miss Mary Waller. Mary is a 30-year realtor specializing in residential and investment properties. Mary served as president of the Women's Council of Realtors, Naples on the Gulf in 2015, and she's currently a sitting member of Naples Area Board of Realtors Board of Directors and member of Collier County's Affordable Housing Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Tina. As this is a part of an Art Pack event, one of the things we do is we honor our veterans. And I would like to ask if there's any veterans, first responders in there, please stand and let us thank you. And I would like to ask Ms. Paula Urbanati Analopoulos, and I know I said it wrong, to come up and lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Paula. Can everyone hear me okay? No? Hello, can you hear me now? Get an echo. Okay, I'm going to try to use this. I have a tendency to turn my head so it goes in and out. But I want to thank you all for coming to educate yourself on the future of affordable housing. At this time, I would like to introduce our panel. First, we have Michael Kuhala. Michael is the Executive Director of Housing Development Corp of Southwest Florida, and he also serves as Home. It's called Home Help Home. Okay. Okay. Then like this, Mr. Jacob Larow. Jacob is the Collier County Manager of the Housing and Grant Development. And last but not least, Mr. Michael Darby, IOM-CCE, for the Naples Executive President and CEO of the Naples Greater Chamber of Commerce. Education, safety, and healthcare. A community cannot thrive without teachers, firefighters, law enforcement officers, medical professionals, local government, police, sheriff officers, school, fire districts, and hospitals are reporting that filling vacancies is becoming increasingly difficult as employees find their paycheck do not cover the cost of rent or mortgage. Okay, my first question for the panel. Would you please tell us what is housing that is affordable or affordable housing or workforce housing, however you want to call it? And we'll start on the end with our elected CEO of Naples Greater Chamber.
Yeah, I thought they would start with.
So that's one of those questions that you can use various factors with. You know, you can say, what is your average median income, and then look at those income levels and say, all right, if you make 60-something thousand, you fall in this category. If you make 80-something thousand, you fall in another category. 120,000. I think when I think about affordable housing that's affordable or attainable, I mean it has to be within. Each person kind of makes that determination of that. And since the time I've been here, oftentimes the statement is generally made, well, if you can't afford to live in Collier County, then you're just going to have to live someplace else. But the challenge with that is that kind of like what Mary said in the very beginning there, we have lots of service workers who make Naples what it is. When you're in the economic development business, we frequently talk of quality of place. So it's not quality of life, it's quality of place. What makes it a great place to be? What makes this a great place to be? And oftentimes that's the quality of the service sector. Making sure that you have all those, whether it's government workers, whether it's healthcare workers, whatever it is that supports you in your living here. And so you'd like to have those individuals to at least live somewhere close, semi-close, so that they can be here and do their work. And to say that, well, everybody else just needs to go live someplace else and they can just kind of drive in here to make that work, it doesn't work. And anybody of us that have all started off someplace driving, an hour and a half to get to your job, you didn't like that all that much and you wanted to move on. And particularly when you move to Florida, you don't bring in your mind the concept of, I bet I'll be like 2.5 hours in traffic each day. You don't think that. So you're looking for housing that you can afford, and oftentimes it's like you shouldn't be spending more than 30% of your household income on housing. Of course, there's people who spend more than that on their housing because they have to. But I think the challenge is trying to find, and for us, for the chamber, frequently it's not talking about people at the lowest end of the scale. Okay, I don't know that I'm being politically correct or not, but I'm not talking about in terms of I have no job, I have no capability, I live on disability. That's one group of individuals, and you need to take care of that group in your community, okay? But oftentimes what we find ourselves talking about are individuals who are kind of in the, like, maybe there's one or two individuals that are making somewhere in the $60,000, $70,000 range. So if you put them both together, you're around $120,000, $170,000. I mean, $140,000, and you're trying to figure out where can I live. And we oftentimes, people don't realize that individuals that are making that kind of money in a household can't find a place to live, cannot find a place that would in any way, shape, or form enable them to get in there and have a home. Because when you start doing all the math and everything put it together, it just doesn't work out. So then oftentimes people talk about, well, let's talk about rental housing. So that's another thing. When I first came here, almost every affordable housing discussion dealt with single-family homes. That is not, at least from our standpoint, when we talk as a Chamber of Commerce, that's not our focus. Our focus is on multifamily rental availability. And anybody who's looked at rental availability lately knows that that is very low, very low. Less than 100 units total that are available at any given time. And I won't go to the quality of those units. So, now you're just starting to narrow down the options for an individual to be able to find housing. So you don't want them to vote with their feet. And we've all heard the stories where somebody gets offered a job in Collier County and goes, it'd be great, I'd love to go there. And then they get online and they start looking at, whether it's Zillow or apartments.com or whatever it is, they start looking at it and they start going, yeah, no, that's not going to work. And they contact the agency that offered them a job, whoever it was, and they say, can't take it. And so you don't know the number of people we lose out of our workforce that could have been here but aren't going to be here. So all these factors, I'm sorry, long answer to a short question, but it's just this concept of what is affordable and what do we need to have to build community, to build the place that we're saying, okay, this is the Naples way of life. This is our vibe. This is what we like to be able to sell as we sell things to people. And trying to make sure you've got enough housing that fits in all these different categories so you have the the workforce that you need to be able to have that. So I didn't answer it very well, but I mean, that's all the factors that come into our mind.
Toss it around.
Well, I think you really, I'm probably just batting cleanup here, maybe I'll leave some for Michael. So, you know, as kind of a program guy, you know, I delve in, I deal with regulations, I deal with statutes every day. So I'll give you, and Michael touched on roughly kind of what is considered affordable. So, and he provided some information or talked some things I think would have a great segue for some comments I'll have. So Michael's right that affordability, at least on the rental side, is considered if you're paying 30% or less of your gross income as a household for housing. So the thing though to remember on that is, you know, I remember a discussion I had in a previous position with the state of Nevada with an economist that I work with, was 30% of your income, if you're at extremely low income, the 30% AMI is a lot when you look comparatively at what some of these 30% of their income, if you're at 100% AMI. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of times with HUD, the federal government, we're kind of left with this one-size-fits-all requirements. We kind of have to fit our programs within that, those confines to the extent that we use funds from the federal government. But so there's some nuance lost in terms of, you know, when we look at what is housing, what is affordable housing, or housing that is affordable, it really depends a lot. And you know, just touch on one quick thing, and I'll let Michael have a shot here, is a lot of the programs, subsidy that's available out there for all the different kind of housing programs, targets for the most part households earning 60% AMI and below. And this will probably come up, and maybe you've seen it in the newspapers, you know, the current Collier County median income for a household of 4 is $84,300. So you're talking, that's not a lot. So when you're talking about developing programs and what kind of programs are available, you have everybody that has 60, 100% AMI, for the most part. There are exceptions that really don't have a lot of options available. They make too much to qualify for what is considered traditional housing that's affordable, tax credit deals, but they certainly are far from being able to afford things in the open market. So those are some of the just kind of highlights in terms of things that as program folks we have to kind of keep an eye on, because you know, there's not this one size fits all. And I see Michael's ready for the button. And just one other quick tidbit too. When we talk about affordable housing burden, so anybody that has that's paying more than 30% of their income for housing is considered rent burden. Anybody that's paying, any household that's paying more than 50% of their gross income for housing is considered a severe rent burden. So if you're looking at for the National Low Income Housing Coalition or some of these national groups that put together a lot of this data, that might be something you might be interested in looking at in terms of the breakdown in terms of Florida and how we're looking at nationally where our households are falling in terms of rent burden.
There's a lot of data. And we kind of live in both worlds. Running a HUD-approved counseling agency, we obviously have to deal a lot with how HUD lays out our income guidelines, and we have various categories. There's extremely low income earning up to 30% of the area median income. We have a very low income, which is up between 30 and 50%. Up to 80% is considered your low income category. We've started to look more at moderate income. You can use some of your state funding, the SHIP funding, on individuals earning up to 120% of area median income. So that's getting more into that moderate category. And then Collier County has even added a gap. We talked about individuals making up to 140% of area median. And sometimes when we're discussing working with a developer, they may look at units that are available in that category between 120, 140% of AMI. That's the technical side of things. And HUD will create a rental cap for that increase associates to that income level. So if you have a developer that's coming in and they're committing to producing rental units for individuals earning up to a certain AMI, they'll have a rent that's associated with that. So they're going to have a restriction, and that can change on an annual basis. The thing we have to keep in mind for an area like Collier County, look at who's moving in. What is that doing to our area median income? Are we gaining more individuals that are maybe pulling the income down, or are we seeing an influx of individuals that are willing to pay $3,000-$4,000 a month in rent because they can work virtually? And hey, let's go to Florida. And we've been paying maybe that in other parts, more urban areas, and so it's not a big deal. That seems comparable. I'm still making the same money. So I think our income, area median income, is destined to continue to increase. So that will also drag up the rent caps for those developers. So just keep some of that in mind. But as we, it's area median income. Right now, 100% of area median income for a family of four in Collier is $84,300. So you can break it down from there. It's $67,450, I believe, for 80% of area median income. That's a family of four. A lot of times it's adjusted for household size. So we don't want to get really, really technical, but there are definitions. Just know when we talk about housing affordability, you have the practical side, which is you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your gross income on rent. A lot of the housing programs will say we can maybe get a housing ratio up to 32% for home ownership. So if we're looking at a mortgage, when we talk about our ratios, our front ratio, our back ratio, that front ratio being everything that you spend on housing. So it'd be your principal, your interest, your taxes, your insurance, and a homeowners association fee if it's applicable. Though that really shouldn't get above 30 to 32% of gross income either. So above that, we're getting cost burden. And as Jacob mentioned, the number's not going down as far as households that are cost burdened because of the increase. I've been putting a lot of grants together, and so we need statistics. Statistics make grants work better. So I looked at just recent data, and there's a group called Prosperity Now. They do a local community outcome report. And just September 2021, they were showing that in Collier County, we were, I believe it was 54% of renters are currently cost burdened. And I think that number's obviously increasing because of the way the rents are. And it's 34.6% of the homeowners were also cost burdened. You've got a little more stability if you're fixing that payment in, getting into a 30-year fixed mortgage. You're hopefully locking that down. And so that's why we want to promote homeownership, but it's just not realistic for everyone. When we talk about the lower income loans, we know what the home prices are. I mean, another number that I looked at when I was doing some grant work, the average, I think it was December of 21, and it might have been through Realtor.com, the average listing price as of December of 2021 in Collier was $625,000. That seems like a pretty big number. And the sale price was $507. That's a 33% increase, I think, in listing price just from January to December. And the rents were even more staggering, in my opinion. It was a 49% increase in the rental rate. So a one-bedroom on average was $1,169 per month in January of 21. That same unit was $1,744 for a one-bedroom unit in December. So I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but when we talk about affordability, what are we doing to try to lock in some rents? Maybe mortgage tools, so we're going to have, I'm sure, a conversation about some of the things that can be done to try to create more opportunity, because it's somewhat lacking right now. I think everybody can agree on that with everything that's happened in the last year to 2 years. It's really gotten pretty dire.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. It's also important to note that affordable housing, workforce housing, housing that is attainable, is not Section 8 housing. It is housing just like any other housing. The only difference, it is presented and sold or rented at a cost that is affordable. That's the only difference. It is, please note, it is not Section subsidized 8 housing. Okay? All right, moving on. In the high cost of in this high cost real estate market, what can be done to ensure that employees can afford housing close enough to work to make their job worthwhile? Toss it in the air.
Start with that one.
Well, I'm selling a book, so no, $50 secrets. No, I wish we had them. I wish we had, no, but there definitely are things that can be done, and that, I know it may seem like nothing has been done. There's been work on this that started probably back in 2016. It's gone before that, but there was a really dedicated effort to bringing together a group of stakeholders in the community back in 2016, and Michael was a big part of that through the chamber. There was up to 45 members that were getting together on a monthly basis. It culminated with ULI, the Urban Land Institute came in, did a 53-page report. This is available online. You can go to the county government site and track it down if you've got enough time to find it. But it is there, I promise. And if anybody wants to email me, I have the link. And it's a very good study, and there were a number of recommendations that were laid out. A lot of those have been vetted, and we started to work on them. One of those was to create a community land trust. And so actually our organization in late 2019 did apply for, received a nominal amount of funding and got this thing going. We incorporated the Collier County Community Land Trust in January 2020. And the premise here is that we can work to look at opportunities to acquire land for future affordable housing development. So that is the intent, what we're looking to do. If we have opportunities for scattered site homeownership through the land trust, separate the value of the land from the price that the individual pays. So it's a very effective model within the statewide. I won't get too much into that because it's pretty technical, and you can go to the website. We have a video up that talks all about if you really want to learn what a land trust does, but that is something that can be done, and that is something that the county has set up. They wanted to see that. So, and we also have the opportunity to work with developers of multifamily housing that is subsidized, that brings in the tax credit deals, that brings in other state, federal funding sources that guarantee rents at a restricted income rate. So that we just closed on January 27th on a deal to produce 160 units of affordable senior rental. They'll be for 62 plus. They're all capped at 60% of AMI or less. So you're going to see lower rents, but you have to income qualify. So it's a matter of mixing some of that into the community. I'm not saying that's the only thing we should do, obviously, but it's about having balance, finding opportunities to incentivize development of multiple types of units, whether it be homeownership, whether it be rental, into the community, and really having some local government contribution. We're going to talk a little bit, I'm sure, tonight about the Housing Trust Fund, and that's something where we can put some local dollars to work to see what does our community need and how do we apply the resources. So I'll leave it there and turn it over to others.
All right, real quick, I'll just expand on the ULI component that Michael touched on. One of the documents that the document that came out of the ULI study was Collier County's Community Housing Plan, which really laid out a number of initiatives and direction that the board, Collier County Commissioners, could take. And we're actually at the establishment of the community land trust was one of those items, and we're at the implementation. Excuse me. The process to evaluate the last 4 initiatives is currently ongoing. Those really, again, not to get into the weeds, but really those initiatives are looking at density. So from a developer's perspective, when you look at how you put a deal together, a number of the variables, one of them is density. So the more units you can put on a certain parcel of land, generally, you're going to be able to collect more rents, right? And as you're collecting more rents, you're going to be able to attain a larger mortgage, construction, financing, that type of stuff. And as a result, deals that might otherwise not work under a given density of a parcel of land, say 5 acres, you increase that density, then you make the development of housing there more attainable. So those last 4 initiatives are going through the process right now. I should have the dates in front of me, so I apologize. If you go to the Collier County website and you look at the Development Services Advisory Committee, I believe that's the next group under growth management that will be taking up those initiatives. And I don't know if we have a clearinghouse or anything like that, but that's something that should anybody want to see what those current drafts are, I can certainly direct folks to where you can find that on the county's website. But more specific to the employee question, There have been developments, planned unit development projects that have gone through the board and been approved by the board that had what we call essential services personnel component to them. That is a term that's defined in our local housing assistance plan. And there's a lot of acronyms, so I got to make sure I'm spelling all these out. So if you hear somebody say LHAP, that's our plan, the local housing assistance plan for the SHIP, which is State Housing Initiatives Partnership funds that we get from the state. So that defines who qualifies as essential personnel. So you're talking teachers, government employees, people that work in skilled trades, that sort of thing. So there's one development that should be opening here shortly. It's called Larow. Some of you might be familiar with it. So that project actually had a certain number of units that had to be set aside and marketed first to essential service personnel. And a number of those units did also have affordability restrictions as well. So not only would people that qualify under essential service personnel category would have preference, but a number of those units also would be deemed affordable as well. So that's steps that projects that have been implemented through the growth management plan process. And I'm not a planner, so I'll leave it at that. I don't want to get into detail because I'll say something incorrect likely. But there's a number of those out there, so if you see those come up, essential service personnel through the regular government process, just keep that in mind. That's kind of what that's all about.
Yeah, so there has been, the county has started to have a handful of these developments that include some component of affordable housing, primarily to either a targeted group of individuals like first responders or essential service personnel, and which is good. I mean, if we think about where we were maybe 5 years ago, we had like next to nothing. Now you're at least adding some on. It's a very small number, but at least it's a good place to start. I think from those units, hopefully we'll be able to kind of use them as a demonstration of, okay, look, this is what it looks like. This is how it looks. This is how it operates. To Mary's point, these are not Section 8 housing. This is not Cabrini Green. This is not bad stuff. This is very nice housing that just happens to take a portion of it and say, this is going to be made available to these individuals that are fall in these categories, which is good. And also, besides the community housing land trust, we had a portion of the sales tax that had a workforce housing land trust component at $20 million. And so that's another component here that can be used, of funds that can be used to acquire lands or to be used on the infrastructure needs to improve a land that can then be used for development of workforce housing. And that's what the terminology that was used in the sales tax was workforce housing, so it didn't narrow it down to those other ones there. So there's things that are starting to be put into place and pieces of the equation, and some things that are starting to work at a kind of a small scale. But Jacob mentioned the D word, density, and it's all, that's one of the major issues there is density and allowing for more density, which allows for a little more affordability as you do that. There have been lots of discussions about all kinds of different components that you could work on. Obviously, land is extremely expensive. Any way that the county or other entity can provide land, that makes a difference. We've had some philanthropy that's jumped in and said, we would provide money towards this. So one of the developments that's being looked at on the former Golden Gate Golf Course has $30 million worth of philanthropic money that's going towards that effort. From three different funds. So the Community Foundation, the Schultz Foundation, and the Orange Park Foundation each put $10 million apiece towards that. Okay, so this is great. They pledged that money about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. We're still in a rezoning kind of discussion about that piece of property. Probably won't see anything happen for another 2 years before you could turn a key. So this stuff doesn't happen quickly. And that's part of the challenge in Collier County is if I go out and start talking to employers, their issue is now, today. So what are you going to do for me to help me now? And the answer is we're not going to do anything fast. It's going to happen slowly. And that doesn't help in many ways, and that irritates them. But that's another thing that Collier County needs to work on is the speed at which we do these developments. I think that we've prided ourselves in the past of being very slow at how to do these things. And what happens, though, when you start talking about philanthropic dollars coming forward and saying, I would help you with this type of development, is they're not real patient.
No.
And, when somebody says, I'll give you $10 million, they would like for something to come out of the ground before they die. And so when it gets really slow, they get really frustrated, they say, okay, we'll stick with you. But if you approached them again and said, okay, now we did that first project and it took 4.5 years to put together, I got another great deal for you to get involved with, and they go, no. There's other places. And we all know that there's places in Florida that are doing a great job, that are putting up affordable housing. They're doing it pretty quickly. And that's because they had already put these things into place and said, if you're willing to agree to build this type of development, this type of housing, make it available, then here's some breaks that you get, whether it's impact fee, whether it's landscaping requirements, whether it's whatever it may be, give you some kind of a break to try to encourage you, incentivize you to be able to do this development. We are not talking about publicly developed housing. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about incentivizing a private developer, and whether it's that developer plus philanthropy money plus some government help in some way, shape, or form, but that's the kind of development that we're talking about. And I think it's doable. We see it happening across the country, but you've got to be able to put things into place so that you're able to say, okay, developer, if you're willing to do that, here's what we can work with you on to make that happen more quickly and make the numbers work for you so that you can make it affordable to the people who are going to be buying, renting these places.
Great, thank you.
Take a field point.
Yeah, Mary, if you just
Okay.
indulge me with one.
Go
I just
ahead.
wanted to clarify, Michael had mentioned about the surtax, and I just shared with the group here that I did receive confirmation that the state statute that governs the ordinance only allows for acquisition of land, and that's it. So I know where at AHAC, I know, Mary, there was some discussion at AHAC in terms of what other eligible costs were allowed under that $20 million. So it is acquisition land, but given, and only that, but given the price of land, it's still going to be a useful tool in terms of assisting projects. And then one other comment, because I know Michael had mentioned, both, Michael's Square. Green was, Chicago public housing back in it's got a long sordid history, but one of the things I think to emphasize too, especially in these tax credit deals, is the public-private partnership, and that's why the Allegro property, the Harmony property, some of these other deals, I'm sorry? Allura is not a tax credit deal. Yeah, so when you hear a lot of those that have like the really deep income targeting the 60% AMI below, that's generally going to have the tax credits. I mean, that's why we're here, right? The market itself does not deliver housing that's affordable across all incomes. So the gap, the equity, the loan, the grants, whatever you want to call it, that make that affordable comes from, tax credits, bond financing, that type of stuff. So I guess my point is that with those kind of deals, you have a number of people that are invested literally for at least 15 years, many times 30 or 50 years. We have investors, Bank of America, U.S. Bank, tax credit syndicators, and they have a very financial duty to ensure that those projects are maintained and are not a blight to the community. And I mean, if you go out and you tour any of these tax credit deals in Florida, you'll see that you put that up against what's the terminology, Class A or market, or just a regular market rate unrestricted property. And I would challenge anyone to be able to point, and tell the difference between the two from the outside. So and that goes to the public-private partnership, is you have a lot of people that are invested to seeing that project succeed. So that's really amongst some of the other nuances why the tax credit program that started in 1986 has been so successful and has been accounted for, greater than 90% of all the housing that's affordable across the United States. So,
I appreciate if you write your questions down on a card, and Danny will pick them up. That way we can get through with our program, and maybe they will answer your questions as we go along. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. What should the local government do to address the issue of producing and preserving affordability in the context of smart growth? Are the answers innovative housing incentives? Let's just talk about a few of those now. Let's start off, gentlemen. I have quite a few, so to show that Collier County is trying. Just need to push a little more. Okay, inclusionary zoning. Inclusionary zoning, for everyone, is not a zoning ordinance. It is a land use regulation that requires a certain number of affordable housing units be built in conjunction with the development of market rate units. It is required that affordable units be comparable in quality and aesthetics to the market rate units. There is a provision in exclusionary zoning whereby, how do I put it? They can opt out, do payment in lieu of supplying the units, if it's shown that to build the affordable unit is just not feasible. So my question for the panel is that, are inclusionary zoning used in Collier County? If so, how is it being used and at what rate?
Shy away from that one? I'm gonna take Jake away from that.
Yeah, I know he can't really answer that.
You gotta be careful.
There's no. So to clarify, Jake works for the county, so he has to kind of maintain what he says.
Neutrality. If you're really talking about the technical inclusionary zoning program, it was one of the items I believe the ULI did look at as an option, and the commissioners said we're not going to get into it. They opted to not have that come forward as an actual policy, but we're seeing it though in application, even if it's not an actual written policy. If we talk about, Michael mentioned the Allura project, I think that was probably the first one where a developer committed to 10%. It's not a huge part of it. We're 304 total units. 31 of those units will be capped at up to a rental rate that is affordable to a household making 80% or less of their median income. So that, by definition, I guess, it's including units that have affordability built in. Blue Coral apartments were recently at least approved. They're still working through things. That one is going to be, if I remember my math right, 234 units, 70 of which are going to be income restricted to 80% of AMI. Now we're talking about a 30% of the units that are going to have some affordability built in. So we're seeing an application, and just this is anecdotal. Where we're hearing the commissioners now say, hey, if we're going to approve more multifamily development, we should make sure that we are asking for a certain level of affordability. That is just responsible. So while we may not have a written policy, we're kind of seeing an application. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, so in essence, they are, in essence, creating a non-written policy.
It's a precedent. We're setting a precedent, and there's been some debate about what's the correct percentage. So I'm not in that arena, but I'm just letting you know what we're seeing.
Okay, anyone else want to join in on that? John, right, I love you guys so much. Okay, impact fees. What type of programs are offered in Collier County to help alleviate the impact fees to produce more units, affordable units? Speak up.
Well, hi, I'm back. There is I know that with, there's a program that will allow a deferral of impact fees, and I don't know the exact terms of what it requires, but it's up to a 10-year deferral. I do know that there is some debate about potentially revamping, looking at a new way to do this, because if we're talking about the tax credit programs that Jake was referencing, having it available for a 10-year period might not be sufficient for tax credit investors to feel comfortable with Saying that, hey, in 10 years, can that be renewed again? They're going to probably require that developer to put the entire amount of that impact fee into the deal up front. And so they're not gaining what they could potentially gain from a deferral, the affordability aspect of it. So there's some conversations about maybe we need to look at some exceptions for just tax credit deals, because that's truly deep affordability. So whether or not that comes through or not, it's just rental. Yeah, we're talking about for rentals. And I don't know much about the impact fee deferral on development of homeownership. So.
Yeah, so much kind of keeping in the idea in terms of housing, we're looking at rental housing and homeownership. So there's an existing deferral program for homeownership as well. And I think it's limited to, I don't know if I want to put a number out there, but there are opportunities for Habitat for Humanity utilizes that with their programs, and that subsidy passes on to the homeowner. And really, it is a deferral, okay? So it is something that eventually would have to be paid back. But the idea is that at the cost of development, the upfront cost, a deferral will help lower the cost initially, and that deferral then can be paid back over time. So much like the 10-year program for the rental, the deferral program for the homeownership allows people to get into homes. And there is, I was going to say a number again, but I'm going to, I like to provide exact numbers, but so that program is robust. We do have a lot of interest and a lot of activity in the homeowner impact fee deferral program. So that does get recorded against the property, of course, as a lien, and all that information is detailed in the I think it's Land Development Code spells that out.
But I think the challenge here on either one of these, I mean, the first one we kind of answered, well, kind of. And then the second one, now you talk about a deferral, but that's not a reduction. And I think that's where the problem comes in, is if you're really trying to incentivize the development of a certain type of property, you need to take a step towards actually providing incentives. And I think that's where kind of the challenge is. We're kind of walking our way into it, which I get it, but I don't know if we're like at some critical point where we maybe need to walk a little faster.
Okay, thank you. The next program that's out there is a density bonus. Could somebody want to take that and explain that what it is, and how can we improve on it?
Well, I can talk on what it is, but in terms of how to improve, I'll leave that for others maybe to comment. And so the Affordable Housing Density Bonus Program is, it basically, in a nutshell, it allows developers to receive additional density on the underlying baseline density. And it's a simple formula that's spelled out. There's no secrets that's spelled out in the Land Development Code. I think it's 2.06 something. That one I just looked at the other day, so I'm pretty confident on that one. And so based on the number of units they set aside, the deeper income targeting, so the more units you set aside for folks earning less, you receive a greater density. So it incentivizes developers to develop more units and set aside more units for people that are earning in the lower spectrum of the income category. So, and that is again secured with an agreement against the property, and so we have a number of those that have been executed in the past. I think the most recent was for a home ownership development project, NC Square. And so I believe that one's still trying to get off the ground. But so that is another incentive, as Mary indicated, to try to do a non-monetary, so it doesn't have any additional dollars coming from the county, but it is something that just, again, addresses the density question in terms of increasing density to make the numbers work.
Mixed-use housing. How this mixed-use housing is when you take commercial property and you build housing over it. Is that been utilized in Collier County?
Not to my knowledge.
It's not discouraged. And I don't know how do you, I've seen a lot of the language, especially talking about some of the changes around activity centers. They're encouraging taking what was deemed commercial property, being able to add residential component. It's a little bit easier to do some of that. There's some expediting in the process. I mean, I know they're working towards some of that to encourage the development of residential units in more urban areas. Mixed use, meaning we have commercial along with some residential units. So it's obviously very, very easy for people to get to work if they're working in that same area. So it's not as though we don't have that ability, that capability, but it's just something that we haven't seen the developer community pick up on. We don't have huge urban areas. I mean, if we really, think about it, it's a little bit of a different market to where, maybe the application is a little harder, but for whatever reason, we just haven't seen a lot of developers. But I've heard some talk. Some people are interested in possibly taking a look at it, but it's not for, I don't think government should ever build units, so I don't think we're gonna see, government's gonna go out and build a mixed use unit. It has to be just encouraged, there has to be programs set up to incentivize developers to come in to do that. We need more certainty in the process. So for a developer to be able to come in and say, this is something I wanna take on, they know exactly if I go here, then this is what I'm going to have to deal with. This is what I'm gaining in incentive or advantage for going in and adding residential units into my commercial space. So it's a little bit more about creating that certainty, and I think that's a lot of what was in ULI and what has been worked on. So I'm encouraged that we're moving in that direction. AHAC has really been doing a nice job of staying on task with that. The Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, sorry to keep throwing out acronyms, they have been very prominent in reviewing some of these planned changes to encourage and look at things that are really going to genuinely create more opportunities.
You see it within the city of Naples. Within the city of Naples, you get examples of that kind of housing. It's just or development, we just don't really have it in the county itself.
How affordable are those?
Yeah, well, right.
Yeah, that's that.
Okay.
It can be done, but obviously, I think if what we're talking about and looking to do is to create mixed use, adding in, the density becomes a piece of that to say, so that if you're going to add some units, there's been talk of, hey, residential is a little bit less impactful, on some of the traffic and parking and things of that nature than certain retail or commercial. So we don't necessarily have to do any massive changes if it's already zoned for commercial. So some of that conversation is taking place, so that it has somewhat paved the way if somebody wanted to create residential rental units that are deemed affordable. It's certainly the opportunity is there.
Yeah, and Michael, it sounds like you could probably work for the management department.
No.
Yeah.
So that's mixed use, I think, is also another element of the 4 initiatives that are moving forward through, but it's the last piece of the ULI, CHP. And one of the other things too, and again, it goes to the point that these are regulatory in nature, that's allowing developers to approach and solve problems differently. And so as a result, developers will then have to kind of reach back into their toolbox to approach these differently, because with mixed use, for example, you might not be able to do a traditional tax credit development, but there are new market tax credits that are available to that you can do commercial and residential with. Again, subsidy isn't as good, so you've got to look at different options. So, folks, developer community want to be a little more creative, but the idea that these regulatory relief initiatives will at least open that possibility.
Okay, Florida Neighborhood Revitalization program. Revitalization program. Someone explain what that is, and is it being used at all in Collier County? Is anyone? This is another.
I'm going to plead ignorance on this one. I'm not familiar with that program.
Okay. So no one knows anything about it. That means Collier County is not utilizing that program, which they said that's there from Florida to help get additional units in, or go into a neighborhood and help get it going.
On Bay Shore, Mary. Bay Shore, in that whole area.
That's going to qualify. That's going high end. Yeah. It's a CRA. Yeah. No? Okay. Okay, before I go forward, is there any questions from the audience?
What?
All the difficult ones going on.
Okay,
You all, Mary, shuffling the deck there. So we got approached by a group that actually has been doing some work in the Intermountain West, so think like resort areas in the western states, and helping them with housing issues. And this group actually purchases older motel units and then repurposes them into worker housing. And everybody, usually when I tell that story, everybody goes, oh yeah, that sounds good. And then you start thinking, okay, now there's some things in Collier County that make that a little challenging. So dwelling size, we have dwelling size restrictions about how small you can be to have a dwelling for housing. I think that came up with courthouse shadows, didn't it? One of the developments or one of the ideas of how to redevelop that area, the units were deemed too small. And so they just kind of like, nope, you're out. Even though, I mean, who's to say what too small is? I mean, that's the market that decides that. Another one was the number of non-related adults per unit. So there's been a few different discussions, particularly among the hospitality industry, about dormitory construction, right? So, you know, if you have certain types of visa holders, you have to provide housing for them to be able to work. And right now, they rent apartments. And they'll put a number of people in those apartment units, but this would be more like a dorm. But right now, there's really no zoning, to my knowledge, that would fit like dorm development within Collier County. So these are these things where you have these kind of like newer ideas that come forward, and people go, yeah, that might work, you know, kind of a thing. But then you get jammed up by regulatory issues that then you would have to go through the process of changing the zoning or changing the regulation to allow that. And again, you're a developer, and you've got money, and how patient is that money? And hey, I can do this in Sarasota, and it's going to work. And so you move on. And that's the challenge is that you got to kind of think through this about what would you allow somebody to do if they were able to develop this type of housing to meet certain demand within your community. Just go with that.
okay, gentlemen, the first question from our audience here is, what can we do as realtors to take the negative stigma away from affordable housing?
Advocate. Just use your voice. I mean, it takes people. You know, we've been seeing more of that. I'm just a very small part of a small organization. We've been dealing with housing here since 2005, I believe, was when the organization first started. We went through the last recession, and you know, there was a lot of momentum. We had the Essential Service Personnel Housing Coalition. We were going to build a cooperative. Everybody was coming together and working towards this initiative because the home prices were escalating at such a high level up to 2004, 2005, 2006. Everything dropped off, and the whole thing kind of went by the wayside for a while because all of a sudden it seemed like there was a lot of affordable housing again because there were a lot of foreclosures. We were dealing with a whole different set of circumstances. So it feels like we're rekindling. We're back to now a very urgent. Hopefully, it would have been nice to keep the momentum all the way through and everybody still realizing that the market dynamics are going to be such. It's going to swing up and down. But we need to keep the foot on the pedal. We need to continue to advocate, continue to talk about it. Be a voice. That would be the one thing I would say. I know we haven't talked a whole lot about home ownership. I feel like I've been talking about rental, but truly what we're geared towards as a counseling agency is pre-purchase counseling, getting households ready. So even if you can't afford today, we need to start talking about credit and debt ratios and putting people on an action plan so that if the opportunity presents itself, they're able to qualify for housing. You need to be mortgage ready. And that takes work sometimes. So that's something that's done. That's a free service through our agency. That's something that can be do. So you can advocate to individuals. That doesn't necessarily take the stigma away, but just as realtors, when you're talking to individuals, if they don't feel like they can qualify today, are you ready? I mean, even if something was available, are you in position to be ready if there's a change in the housing market? And we're doing things through, local. We hope there'll be an increase in the amount of down payment assistance subsidy that is available. There's talk that there's going to be more funding that comes from the state level to our SHIP down payment assistance program, and also proposals to increase the amount available per household, because there's a gap. The gap is growing because, for a lower income household. So just be aware, know what's happening within the marketplace, but certainly if you hear negative talk about housing affordability, just be as prepared as you can be to combat that. Reading, I think there's a lot more information that's available. I really do think the ULS study was very detailed. If you haven't read it, that's a very good starting point, but there's all kinds of resources around. We're trying to get together, maybe do something that's more concise, potentially blog or a site. I know the county has invested quite a bit in housing affordability, and there have been videos put out on combating NIMBYism. They did hire a marketing consultant, Quest, I believe. Yes, thank you. Okay, so that's a great site. I'll let Collier County Housing.com. Ours is collierhousing.com, so just colliercountyhousing.com. That's a site dedicated to more or less talking about housing affordability. Who's there? Who's it impact? There's some videos, so a good resource. I would recommend checking that out to prepare for those conversations.
I'll stay clear of the advocating piece of it, but I would say, Michael's group works with us with the down payment assistance programs that we have through the county community and human services, the division I work in, which is a division of the public services department. So for folks that if you see or somebody's you're working with a home buyer that might be able to qualify, certainly reach out. We have some great staff that work very diligently in qualifying people. There's a lot of paperwork, as I'm sure realtors you can appreciate that. Probably not any big surprise there. But just work with our folks work with home buyers to try to get them qualified. And also too, the state of Florida, the Florida Housing Finance Corporation also has down payment assistance programs. I'm sure you're probably aware of that. A lot of those do also have income qualifications, and I believe there was some potential discussion at the state level about expanding them through legislation. I don't recall off the top of my head, but I know that came up in AHAC. So just, if there's a program that we don't have available, people might not qualify for all programs, just be aware that there's other state programs. And there's a state program that's very robust. They use tax exempt bond financing to run that program, and it's a pretty well run, pretty good organization to work with.
Okay. Can we adjust the income threshold for what is considered to be workforce housing to include the middle class?
That was my question. Let me explain it. Because if the thresholds are so low, those of us who are in the middle class, we wouldn't qualify for that because we make too much. So can we adjust it to, raise it up a little bit higher to include us? We need love too. Okay?
Well, I think Michael kind of alluded to that in his comment about people making, 120 to 140,000 AMI. Well, unfortunately, the answer to that is, for the most part, no. The AMI limits are either determined by HUD and they're passed down through our programs, either through the grants that we use or through the tax credit program, or from the state that largely uses the HUD and the income limits determined by HUD. So they turn around and pass that down for the SHIP program, which is 120%. So unfortunately, that we're limited there. I would say.
How do we advocate to change it? Because you're looking out at the population that's still looking out for it.
Fair enough. I would, well, I would say that, you know, and the other part too is that, you know, as what is middle class, you know, part of the other difficulty that we run into using these programs is that they're updated annually. So the new income limits will be released April, and those run across a number of HUD programs, but those are only done annually. And given, and also the rents, fair market rents are actually released in October, and those rents are then used to calculate the rents that we use in our restricted programs that are also released in the spring. So we're always playing catch up. So, you know, just acknowledging kind of the restrictions based on the programs that we have available through the federal government, through the state of Florida, is, you know, we're always behind. And given this hot market, you know, as program folks, our hands are tied. I'm sure you can, Jackie, I know you know how to advocate.
I have another question coming through.
So,
And that's the part that's so frustrating for many people, because you're saying it applies, but we don't qualify, so why even tell us to
Jackie?
apply if we don't qualify? Yes, Ms. Mary, I'll listen to you.
Thank you very much. Let me get through the other questions, and he'll be around, and you can speak to him later on about that, okay? Thank you very much for understanding. Okay, how much has ADUs been studied as a solution?
ADU stand for accessory dwelling units.
Yes.
And I can't answer how much that's been studied at the county level. I know it's been discussed. There hasn't been a strong appetite politically to include that as an option, but I know it has been brought forward a number of times, especially through AHAC. There have been a few people that have really said that's something that can be done, and honestly, it is something that could be passed to allow individuals if you have that. But I think it's something that's fairly hard to regulate. You know, you do get into a whole other set of circumstances there when you start to create rental units on a residential property. So I think that that's probably part of it. I don't want to speak on behalf of county government, but you know, the regulation of that program, code enforcement, some of those issues that they've maybe looked at, and maybe some of the reasoning why there hasn't been an appetite for it. But I know it has been discussed quite a bit in all the time that I've been coming to AHAC meetings. It just was brought up again at a meeting as something that probably needs to come forward again. So I don't have a strong answer as to why it hasn't happened at this point, but again, just thinking that maybe the regulation and monitoring and compliance part of that would be a bit of a challenge. So, but I do know that's something that could make a difference.
Okay, next question. It was stated that Collier County is slow on getting approvals for projects. Why? Who can the public contact to get them to move a little faster?
No. So you know, this is process, and it's, you have to, number one, advocate for the process to change. So the county leadership needs to hear voices that talk about, look, we need to speed this up. It's just getting crazy. Now, the county has its own set of challenges right now because of staffing issues, because of housing issues. So you got staffing issues. You don't have enough staff to deal with some of the demand that's happening about, you know, pulling permits, doing all those kind of things like that. But you have to let the elected leaders know that this is something that's like, can we do something about this? Because that's purely in the hands. It's not. Jake's not the issue. Okay. This is just, yeah. Thank you. But it's just the concept of, there's almost been like a ingrained reaction that just becomes, just go slow, go super slow. And some of that is as well, just how much staying power do they have? You know, if they really want to do this project, let's see if they stick with it. If, you know, I mean, it's just, it's there. But if you keep saying over and over, we've got to speed this up. They're going to hear a little bit of this on the 22nd, next week, next Tuesday. There's some housing discussions that are going to take place there, and some things that are going to be presented. And you don't have to be present at the meeting. I tell people this all the time. You know, if any of you have spent an entire day at a county commission meeting, it's no fun, all right? And So, but they do need to hear your voice. So shoot them an email. Shoot them an email and tell them, hey, you know, there's some issues here that need to get addressed, and there's some ideas that need to be considered, whether it's accessory dwelling units, whatever it may be. Wherever you feel like you're willing to say, you know, that would make sense if we could make that happen here in our community. They need to hear that voice. Honestly, for me, it's great to hear that there's more positive discussions about this topic, because there's two major things that have to happen. Number one is regulatory change. Okay, you need to change up, tweak some things, allow things to happen that you weren't previously allowing happen, giving incentives that you weren't previously giving. That's one, big step number one. Step number two, and this is where it gets really hairy, is NIMBYism. So I can make it available for you to do the type of development. I can give you incentives towards the development, but then you have to deal with it, the great uprising of people that say, not in my backyard. And then you have to come in with the other side. I mean, we literally looked at a program in Colorado in the mountain areas that it was yes, in my backyard, so yippieism. But it was just the concept of trying to get people to understand, and they're not going to do that, but get them to understand just, okay, this is what we were talking about. And sometimes it takes nothing more than showing the actual picture of what this is going to look like. It's because it looks like this. And it's not going to look like some kind of crazy bad thing. It looks like this. We about a year, I guess now it's been 2 years ago, we had a hearing at the Board of County Commissioners, and we brought a number of young professionals to stand up and just go, I am the face of affordable housing. These were 20-something, early 30-something-year-olds. They're mid-level professionals, and just like the comment about, you know, this is what they're making, but they are the face of workforce housing. And there was a whole room of people all wearing red shirts. They were like, no, no, no. And, you know, the people would get to the podium and say, I am the face of affordable housing. And they turn around and they look at the group, and the group would all drop their heads. Because it was like, you liked it when it was somebody who seemed like a bad other. But when it all of a sudden became somebody that looked like, you know, your daughter, then it was kind of like, oh, well, you're okay. Well, that's what we're talking about here. And so some of that's going to have to take place. And not that I'm some kind of rabble-rouser, but I mean, it's just this concept of you have to look at two different areas. One is this regulatory, and the other one is we're going to have to fight the battle then of, okay, this is going to work okay. Trust me, it'll be all right, you know, kind of thing. And then once we get more of these developments that we're able to point to and say, okay, see this development? It actually includes this number of units of affordable housing in it. And it's working well, and it's doing good, and it looks nice, and everything's fine, okay? Are we good with that? Then we get to do it again in another way. But we have to kind of get through some repetitions of pointing and saying, this is what we're talking about, this is how it works, and that's okay, right? And then keep going here. We're just so far behind the 8 ball. I mean, just way behind everybody else that's kind of going forward in some of this stuff. But you got to start somewhere, and we're in that starting position.
Okay.
Mary, just one comment.
Go ahead.
So we do have an expedited permit review process for projects that do have an affordable housing component to it. So there is some relief there that is required for us to receive SHIP funds from the state. So.
Okay, I have a couple questions that are basically the same. They want to know about ESP, and is the definition changed? Did it include retired ESP and Collier County workers? And are there any proposals for billing any housing west of 951?
Mary, that was my question.
I know.
Regarding the 2017 initiative that you're working on in terms of proposed amendments, one of the initiatives for the land development code change is to specifically say ESP, Collier County employees, or retired ESP of Collier County. And that does not address anyone else. Is that still the same wording in the proposed initiative?
So the essential service personnel definition that we use, and you'll see when there's PD and things approved at the board level, is it's defined in our local housing assistance plan, and so to answer your question, it does not include retirees.
That's one of proposed
Right.
changes to the land development code 2.06.04.
You mean the ones that are currently going through the
That are
growth?
being looked at now.
Well, essential service personnel, that when it's defined in the code, it references back to our LHAP. So it wouldn't technically require an amendment to the code. Really, the foundational document for that is our LHAP. So to the extent that there's any reference to ESP, that's either in the land development code or in a PUD or anything like that, it's all going to come back to our LHAP. And that's revised every 3 years, and we're currently undergoing revisions to that at the moment. So.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick one. Rental rates are soaring at a blinding pace. Collier citizens are experiencing home uncertainty due to these sudden rate increases. Is there any help out there for them?
I think I can probably jump on this one. The answer is yes, and it takes a little digging, but there is currently right now in the Emergency Rental Assistance Program and county housing staff, they've set up a dedicated office to working with applicants. I believe it's at 41 and 951 area. So there are staff. You can go to the Collier County Housing.com. I think it's Collier. I don't want to get the site, but if you just Google Collier Rental Assistance, I believe that site pops right up. So you can do applications. One of the criteria for qualifying for that assistance was that you had to have a, oh, here we go, look at, there's that flyer, look at how detailed and organized she is. And there's a phone number, email address, so, but anyway, one of the criteria initially was that you had to have a hardship due to COVID. They even changed, and there's an adaptation, a new part of that program. Now they've changed it to a hardship during COVID. And these massive rental increases have been looked at as a hardship. The county's actually looking at that, okay, that's a hardship. Now this may seem like a temporary fix, but if we're talking about just immediate assistance to keep people housed, they haven't put a cap on how much they'll pay monthly, and that was on purpose because they are seeing massive increases. So and it's ongoing, can be ongoing for, I believe, up to 15 months of assistance that is available in total. So this is not a small amount of money. These are some of the COVID dollars. There's now local fiscal recovery dollars that are being put out as well. There's going to be another program that's called ARP, which is the American Rescue Plan. That's going to have a rental assistance component and utility assistance component as well. That's really to capture a little bit higher income, because if you're looking at ERA, there is an income cap up to 80% of area median income. But under the proposed ARP program, which should be out hopefully by the first or second week of March, and we will be a part of helping with the mortgage side of that. So that I'm speaking with some certainty on that. That's to go up to 140% of area median income. So they're trying hard, to your point, trying to find some ways, if we've got some flexibility, to create programming to help individuals that are maybe earning a little bit higher income, because those rent increases are affecting not just individuals on the lower income scale. So the answer is yes, there's some programs I would really strongly advocate for contacting, going to the website, learning about the application process, or if you have somebody, feel free to have them contact our office. We are also going to be starting an eviction diversion program. That includes Collier County Judge. Judge Martin was involved with advocating for that. Legal aid is involved with that, so to help individuals get the legal assistance if they actually do get an eviction notice. There's an immediate referral. County government has been involved throughout, and they've said we will expedite applications for individuals that are actually facing an eviction. So there really are a lot of collaboration that happens behind the scenes to find ways, and then we're also collaborating with organizations that have other programs. The United Way and Salvation Army are partnering. They're doing a homelessness prevention program, so they have some rental dollars available. Those came through the Department of Children and Families. So it's amazing how many different pools of money came in, but it makes it a little challenging to not duplicate benefits, because you can't have a duplication of benefits. You can't have two different pools of money paying the same month's rent. So every organization that's involved with doing that has to be collaborating to make sure that they're not duplicating. So we're working to get everybody user rights to the software program that we're going to be utilizing to manage the ARP program, so that quickly we can see if that individual's already applied elsewhere.
What is 80%?
What is 80%?
Yeah.
So like for a household of four, it's I believe $67,450 currently.
Like a single mother who's a
saying that's going to be down probably high 40s for 80% of AMI. Very, very possibly. I know it was right on the cusp of a single starting salary for teaching. It was close to the 80% AMI already, so you get any bonuses, any increase for tenure, it starts to push people over that. So I know that was something we've heard from CCPS too, is that how you change, but a lot of that is done at the federal level, so you can't go changing how you're going to allow your programs to be administered. Those caps are set, but I'm pretty sure it's around high 40,000s for a one-person household, if not low 50s. Then 2% is 54,000. That one I know.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, I just wanted to add one thing. NAMI is partnering with CCAP.
Yes, they are,
It
sorry.
runs out immediately to people because CCAP takes 90 days. I talked to them myself, and I talked to the director of NAMI. He can cut checks weekly. So what they're doing is they're partnering with CCAP to get funds out immediately and then transitioning those people over to CCAP for long-term benefit.
Yeah, and we have seen, I had one this week that they actually cut the check same week at the county level.
Yeah.
So I have seen it where if it's an urgent need, when we got that eviction notice, because the eviction notice was filed, the young man went and picked the check up at county government. They were very, very accommodating. So we always got to get on county government. I got to advocate and give them their props. And the individuals we've worked with on this program, they work late, they work weekends. They really are trying to do everything they can. There's some individuals that really, really care about the community. There's some stuff that they can't really change. Obviously, there's regulations, there's program requirements. This is federal money. You've got monitoring that takes place. But to the extent that they can adapt the program, and like I said, they've made some adaptations to make it a little more flexible and get things out more timely. So I've been really pleased to see some of the efforts that have taken place to help. It's not perfect, but it really, there's been a lot of people that have been allowed to stay in their rental unit. One of the issues is renewals. I mean, it's not only evictions. If the landlord doesn't want to renew for any reason, that's still an issue. It's finding a replacement unit can be a challenge, but again, some of the things that we've continuously discussed behind the scenes of how can we incentivize landlords to want to renew, and they've come up with some programs on that as well. So.
Okay, well, I thank you all. I'm going to wrap it up now. I hope everyone has gotten something out of this and have a little better understanding of what attainable housing really means and what it is and how to help. One of the things that was brought up is let your voices be heard. Go to the BCC and go let your voices, anyone from the public is allowed to speak. Go up there, make your statement, and sit down. It's very simple.
3 minutes.
But I thank you. You got 3 minutes to say what you want to say, and they let you do it. So I thank everyone, and let's give these wonderful gentlemen a beautiful round of applause. Thank you so much.